Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC San Diego, we saw in the main event Marlon Vera versus Dominick Cruz. We saw Dominick Cruz get brutally head kicked TKO'd in the fourth round. Dominick Cruz leaned right into it, and Chito Vera just slammed a head kick right into the nose, broke the nose of Dominick Cruz, sent him face down on the canvas, and then followed up with some ground and pound shots. And with Dominick Cruz and his advanced age and the fact that he got finished by Marlon Vera, a lot of people are talking after UFC San Diego that Dominick Cruz should retire. So I wanted to make a video giving my personal opinion on whether or not I think Dominick Cruz should retire. But also, I want to talk about the tragedy that is Dominick Cruz's career, because I feel like it's not talked about nearly enough. And then on top of that, if Dominick Cruz does decide to continue fighting in the UFC, I'm going to give you some potential matchups for Dominick Cruz in his next fight. So first off, before we get into any of that, you have Dominick Cruz, who's now lost 3 out of his last 5. He has wins over Casey Kenny. That wasn't that impressive. He defeated Pedro Munoz, where he got rocked badly in the first round and then came back to win the second and third round. And then, his most recent fight is against Marlon Vera, where I already discussed it. He got head kick KO'd. Before that, it was a loss to Henry Cejudo, where he got finished, but that was short notice coming in off a long layoff. And before that was when he lost the bantamweight title to Cody Garbrandt, where he just got outclassed. And, Dominick Cruz, he's only ever been TKO'd twice. And I feel like the reason people are so adamant talking retirement with Dominick Cruz is because of his age, but then also the way he got KO'd by Marlon Vera, and also the fact that Marlon Vera hurt him I think 3 out of 4 rounds. He stung Dominick Cruz, whether it was dropping him with a jab or dropping him with a right hook. It was just Dominick Cruz was continually getting rocked in this fight. But I think Marlon Vera has a lot of power. He's finishing guys left and right. So I don't think it's that bad to be getting rocked by, Chito Vera like that. And it's not like Dominick Cruz is one of those guys who's been KO'd 20 times in a row. So I really don't think it's all that bad. But I think people are just, they look at him laying face down, nose broken, busted up, bleeding, looking at the bantamweight division and how stacked it is. And they're saying, this guy needs to retire. I don't want to see him fight anymore. But they're not looking at the actual fight, because Dominick Cruz had a lot of success in the Vera fight. And in my opinion, he could have been up 3-0. I know that sounds a little bit crazy. I think he could have been up 3-0 in the fight, won all of the first 3 rounds. Vera just wasn't throwing a lot of strikes, not a lot of volume, and Cruz was landing good volume, good leg kicks. I think, it should have been probably 2-1. I would have gave the third round to Chito Vera. But either way, it wasn't like Dominick Cruz got blown out of the water by Marlon Vera. And that's why I really think, it's debatable. There's some guys that stick around for too long. They're getting KO'd after KO. Look at Bigfoot Silva. Somebody needs to be thrown in jail for what's going on with Bigfoot Silva. Dominick Cruz is nowhere near that point. And, before I even get into whether or not I think he should retire, Dominick Cruz has a travesty of a UFC career, because I know there is some people who are calling him the bantamweight GOAT, myself included. I do believe he is the bantamweight GOAT based on what he did in WEC as well as the UFC. But over the course of 12 years in the UFC, he's been fighting in the UFC since 2011. He only has 10 fights. That's less than a fight a year since he's been in the UFC. And, if you didn't watch Dominick Cruz back in his prime, he's still very good. But if you didn't watch him back in his prime, you have no idea what you were missing. He was a sight to behold back in his prime. He just looked so good. He looked untouchable, unbeatable. And I also think that's another reason why people are so quick to say it's time for Cruz to retire, because he went from essentially never getting hit to now he's getting TKO'd by Marlon Vera. And I think that's why a lot of people are doing that. But it's such a travesty, because I believe Dominick Cruz, a healthy Dominick Cruz over the past 12 years, would have had a John Jones, Anderson Silva-esque legacy, because he would have defended the belt multiple times. He was I think he was stripped of the belt, or he vacated the belt after being injured for so long, and Renan Barão was the champion for a while, and they were trying to hold out for a Dominick Cruz Renan Barão fight that never ended up happening. Then he returned after a long layoff to fight TJ Dillashaw, and he took the belt off TJ Dillashaw after being out for literal years from injuries. And I think it's sad, because only 10 fights in the UFC, and 3 of those are losses. And so he only has 7 wins in the UFC, which doesn't sound all that great. But I believe had he been healthy, he lost the prime of his career to knee injuries. I think he had 2 or 3 ACL tears. Then he had groin injuries. And it's just, there was feet injuries. I mean, it's just the litany of injuries from Dominick Cruz is a true travesty, not only for the career of Dominick Cruz, but for us MMA fans, because he was one of the funnest fighters to watch fight, and he was such a tough puzzle to figure out. And even though he's still very good, I think a lot of people are, underestimating his skills just because he's getting up there in age. He was so much better. I mean, go back and watch some of those fights. The Dominick Cruz that is around in 2022 just is not the same Dominick Cruz from 2015, 2014, whatever year you want to look back in those 4 or 5 years where Dominick Cruz was in his early 30s to mid 30s. He was just a different animal. And I think that's why seeing him get beat up and finished by certain guys just makes us feel a certain way. Because I personally, I watched Cruz come into the UFC. I became a UFC fan, I believe, in 2010. So I watched Cruz come into the UFC, crown the bantamweight champion, coming over from WEC. And then I just watched these litany of injuries, and everyone was so excited. When's Cruz going to return? When's Cruz going to return? And then he was just perpetually out. And I really believe that is a true travesty. And it's one of those what ifs, because I honestly believe he would have a John Jones and Anderson Silva or a GSP type legacy had he been healthy for the majority of his career. Instead of being, 7-3 in the UFC, 7-3. One of the greatest bantamweights of all time is 7-3 in the UFC. That's unbelievable. As far as whether or not he should retire, I mean, that's up to Dominick Cruz, obviously. But I think he still has the skills to be able to compete with some of the elite of the division. But if Dominick Cruz's only goal is to regain the bantamweight title, then he definitely should retire, okay? Because the bantamweight division is the nastiest division in all the UFC. It is the most talent-stacked division in all the UFC. And I have a hard time believing Dominick Cruz can string together a win streak, especially against the elite of the elite. I mean, there's elite bantamweight fighters who aren't even in the top 15. That's how good the division is. So I really believe if his goal is to be a champion again, it's not going to happen. But if his goal is just to have fights and be competitive within the division, I think up until he's getting KO'd every fight out, I think Dominick Cruz is more than competitive in the bantamweight division, and I think there's a lot of fun fights for Dominick Cruz in the division. It'd be really sad to see him become a gatekeeper or maybe like a number 1 contender keeper. A little bit better than a gatekeeper, but he's not ever going to be a title contender again. I believe the fight against Marlon Vera was his last chance to make himself known as a number 1 contender in the bantamweight division, and he ended up losing. I just don't see him wheeling off a win streak that would be needed to get to the top of the division. I mean, you look at the top of the division, Sterling's the champion, TJ Dillashaw is challenging for the belt, you have Piotr Jan, you have, Marlon Chito Vera, you got Jose Aldo, you got Merab, you got Sean O'Malley. The division just goes on and on and on. It's the most talent-rich division in all the UFC. I don't think he can string 3-4 wins together and get a title shot. So it was now or never in the Marlon Vera fight, and unfortunately he got finished in the 4th round. But if he does decide to continue fighting, which I believe he has the skills, I don't think he should be forced to retire. I still believe he is an elite fighter. And this is one of those scenarios where this is going to be a bad comparison for some people because they don't agree with me on this. But this reminds me of Tony Ferguson. A lot of people think Tony Ferguson's washed up and that he's terrible. I still believe that Tony Ferguson is a good fighter. It's just the division is so good, it's passing him by. He's getting out-grappled by grapplers. And then in the Chandler fight, he gets punted and KO'd. But I still believe the skills are there to be competitive. Maybe not towards the very top of the division, but still within that top 10 to 15 of the division. I still think he has the skills to be competitive and can hang around there and beat some guys. He's going to lose some fights, but beat some guys. I think Dominick Cruz is in that same type of area. I mean, look how good he looked. Marlon Vera is on the verge of a title shot. One more win, I think Marlon Vera will be fighting for a bantamweight title. So it's not a bad loss to have. And even though he lost the fight, he still even looked good in that fight. So I get it. I think he's 37 years old, going on 38. But I still think if Dominick Cruz wants to stick around, he wants to continue to fight, I think he has more than enough skills to continue being competitive in the bantamweight division. And until he's getting, flatline KO'd, 2 or 3 times in a row, I will never say Dominick Cruz needs to retire. He looked very good against Marlon Vera. Now, if he does decide to continue fighting, which I believe he will, who should he fight next? And I actually have 3 potential options for Dominick Cruz in his next fight. I'm going to go from least likely to most likely. First on that list is Dominick Cruz versus Jose Aldo. Now, this is there's an asterisk next to this matchup because that's if Jose Aldo loses to Merab Dvalishvili at UFC 278, which is this upcoming Saturday. I'll be doing a breakdown and prediction for that fight on the channel, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. But if Jose Aldo is to lose this fight, I would love to see Dominick Cruz versus Jose Aldo at 135 pounds. 2 WEC legends. You have Jose Aldo, who's on a 3-fight win streak right now. Jose Aldo has looked incredible at bantamweight, and this is a dream matchup for hardcore fans and fans who have been watching for a long time to see Cruz versus Jose Aldo. I kind of wanted to see if Cruz beat Vera and Aldo beat Merab. I wanted to see them matched up for a potential #1 contender fight. But if Jose is to lose to Merab, which is in the realm of possibility, I think the UFC should match those up. But I don't think this is super likely because, Jose Aldo, I really don't want to see Cruz. I want to see Cruz versus Jose Aldo. But at the same time, I don't know if Aldo is going to lose to Merab. And also, I think Aldo is just superior. I think Aldo will win that fight against Cruz. So I think it's possible, especially if Aldo loses. But I don't think it's super likely. Moving up on the list, and I would actually love to see this matchup, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, and this makes a lot of sense right now. I want to see Dominick Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt 2. Now, this kind of comes with a caveat as well. That's if Cody Garbrandt beats Ronnie Yahya. He has a fight on October 1st. And if Cody Garbrandt beats Ronnie Yahya, Cody Garbrandt's kind of in a weird position in his career too. He's lost, I think, 5 out of his last 6. He's been getting brutally KO'd nonstop. He's kind of got a bounce back fight in Ronnie Yahya. And if he wins that fight in October, Dominick Cruz is going to need some time off. I would love to see this rematch. This would be a rematch of a 2016 title fight where Cody Garbrandt went out there and just outclassed Dominick Cruz for 5 rounds. And it was a fight that a lot of people thought Cruz was going to win, and Garbrandt went out there and just showed that he was far superior. And I would love to see this ran back all these years later, especially if Garbrandt is able to get a win against Ronnie Yahya, because Garbrandt isn't even ranked in the bantamweight division anymore. That's how far he's fallen. Now, the UFC has given him this rebound fight against Ronnie Yahya, which I believe he will win. And if he does win, he's not going to fight for the rest of this year probably. He probably won't fight till the second quarter of next year. Dominick Cruz has that broken nose. He's going to need some time off. And I say book Dominick Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt. What a storyline that would be. A rematch in the making 6 years after that world-class performance from Cody Garbrandt. Both guys have changed so much since then. I would love to see that fight ran back. Okay, now first on the list, and the fight that I believe makes most sense, and the fight that I would like to see the most, and it really makes a lot of sense other than time frame a little bit, and that is Dominick Cruz versus Frankie Edgar. Who wouldn't love to see this fight? Frankie Edgar has lost 4 out of his last 5. He got KO'd in his last 2 fights himself. He's a legend in the sport as well. He's still pretty good, but at the same time, Frankie Edgar's on the verge of retiring. Frankie Edgar is 40 years old. It's hard to be at an advanced age at a lower weight class. You can pull it off at light heavyweight. You can pull it off at heavyweight. It's hard to remain competitive at these lower weight classes at an advanced age. Frankie Edgar's 40 years old. He said his next fight's probably going to be his last fight. He even called out Dominick Cruz a couple weeks ago, said he wanted to fight him at MSG. Now, that card at UFC 281 is in November. That's going to be too soon, most likely, for Dominick Cruz to return after a broken nose and a KO loss. But if they can push that down the line a little bit, I think that's the fight that makes the most sense. Why not book 2 legends, 2 former champions against each other? I think it's a very competitive fight. I think it's an intriguing fight. I think it'd be a fight that could be on a pay-per-view card or even like a co-main event of a fight night card, maybe even a main event of a fight night card. I mean, when you got Mackenzie Dern versus Yan Xiaonan as a main event, I think Dominick Cruz versus Frankie Edgar at 135 pounds could easily be a main event. I think it's a compelling matchup. I'm hoping neither one of them gets KO'd. Maybe it's a hard-fought decision. And I think it would be a great fight for Frankie Edgar to go out on. And if Dominick Cruz maybe wants to get a win and then retire because he's got his job in broadcasting, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's a winnable fight for Dominick Cruz as well. So I say the UFC, make Frankie Edgar wait a little bit, make him wait till the early next year, and book Dominick Cruz versus Frankie Edgar. Let me know what you guys think down in the description. Should Dominick Cruz retire? If he doesn't retire, who should he fight next? Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.